Did you know that just a few centuries ago, the world effectively ended a few miles past the shoreline? On the best maps, the ones drawn by nervous monks on expensive vellum, the known world was a small, cozy island of certainty in a vast ocean of myth. The edges of these maps weren't just blank, they were actively hostile, decorated with curling sea serpents, krokens pulling ships to their doom, and winds depicted as puffy-cheeked faces with grim intentions. The world was not a globe to be circumnavigated. It was a precarious platform, and to sail too far was to risk falling off the edge of everything you knew. It's a comforting thought, in a way, knowing exactly where the monsters are, before you get too comfortable. Go ahead and like this video, and subscribe to the channel, to encourage me to make more content like this. Also, let us know where you're watching from, and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, and let's begin tonight's journey. You are standing on a cliff in Portugal, sometime in the mid-1400s. The air is thick with the smell of salt and drying fish. The wind whips your cloak around you, a constant, restless presence. Below, the Atlantic Ocean crashes against the rocks, a churning, grey-green expanse of infinite power and mystery. This ocean is not an invitation, it is a barrier, it is the end. To your back is Europe, a continent that feels old, crowded, and increasingly trapped. You are a product of this time, and your mind is a fortress built of solid traditions and equally solid fears. The Great Plague is still a living memory, a dark shadow that proved how fragile life could be. The old feudal certainties are crumbling, and in their place, a new kind of hunger is growing, a hunger for wealth, for status, for something more. The source of this hunger, the thing everyone whispers about in the marketplaces and taverns, comes from the East. Spices. It sounds so simple now, a small jar in your kitchen cabinet. But for you, spices are the very essence of wealth and luxury. A peppercorn is not just a seasoning, it is a tiny, black pearl of condensed value. A stick of cinnamon is the scent of paradise. Nutmeg can preserve your meat, cure your ailments, and signal your immense status to your neighbors. Spices are the 15th century equivalent of controlling the world's oil supply, and the trade routes are a long, perilous, and fantastically expensive conveyor belt. Goods travel over land on the Silk Road, passed from merchant to merchant, each one adding their cut, until the price of a pound of pepper in Lisbon is enough to buy a small farm. But something has happened. In 1453, the great city of Constantinople, the gateway to the East, fell to the Ottoman Empire. The door has been slammed shut, the prices have skyrocketed, and the powerful Italian city-states, like Venice and Genoa, who control what little trade remains, are growing fat while the rest of Europe starves for flavor and profit. This is the pressure cooker you live in. Your food is bland, your opportunities are limited, your countenance is cornered, and so you turn back to the sea. You look at that terrifying, endless water, and a new thought begins to form, a dangerous and intoxicating idea. What if the sea is not a barrier? What if it is a road? This thought is not just about economics, it's also wrapped in myth and faith. You hear whispers of a lost Christian kingdom in the East, a land of wonders ruled by a powerful priest-king named Prester John. If only you could find him, you could forge an alliance, outflank the Muslim world, and reclaim the Holy Land. It is a powerful fantasy, a quest blessed by God himself. Historians still debate whether the primary motivation was religious zeal, the raw pursuit of wealth, or the simple human craving for fame and glory. But for you, standing on that cliff, they are all the same thing. They are a reason to conquer your fear. The monsters on the map are still there, but the desire for what lies beyond them is finally starting to burn hotter than the terror of the unknown. The world feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for someone to be brave enough or foolish enough to take that first step into the great, watery void. You walk away from the cliff and journey south to the very tip of Portugal, to a windswept promontory called Segros. It feels like the end of the earth, a place where the land gives up and the ocean takes over. It is here that you find the engine of this new age, and it is not what you expected. There is no grand academy, no bustling port filled with adventurers sharpening their swords. Instead, you find a quiet, almost monastic community, a collection of villas and workshops clinging to the rock. This is the brainchild of one man, a prince of Portugal named Henry. He is a strange and intense figure, a man possessed by a single, all-consuming idea to chart a course around Africa. You know him as Prince Henry the Navigator, which is a fantastic title, but also a bit of clever marketing, because the prince himself rarely sails further than the local fishing grounds. He is not the captain, he is the strategist, the obsessive, data-driven CEO of exploration. Here at Sagres, you see the true work begin. It is methodical, not romantic. In one building, you see grizzled sailors, men with skin like leather and eyes that have seen too much, being debriefed. They are living data points. Where did the currents change? What were the winds like in July? How many days did it take to get from that cape to the next river mouth? In another room, cartographers, hunched over massive tables, take this raw information and painstakingly translate it onto new maps. Portolan charts that are less art and more brutal, functional tools. They scratch out the sea serpents and replace them with wind patterns and navigational hazards. The unknown is being systematically catalogued and conquered, not with a sword, but with ink and parchment. You can hear the sounds of shipwrights in a nearby cove, experimenting with new designs, refining the vessels that will carry these men further and further into the void. The Portuguese approach is a slow, agonizing grind. It is not about one glorious leap into the unknown. It is a crawl. Each year, an expedition pushes a little further down the forbidding coast of Africa, plants a stone pillar called a redrew to mark the new limit of discovery, and then, if they are lucky, they return. For 15 years, Portuguese sailors were haunted by a place called Cape Bajador. It was a psychological barrier more than a physical one. The winds and currents there were treacherous, creating a conviction that it was the point of no return. Ships went south and were never seen again. It was a monster on the map, made real, a place where the sea itself seemed to say, no further. You can feel the weight of that fear, the accumulated dread of a generation of sailors. Then, in 1434, one of Henry's captains, Gil Ians, finally did it. Pressured by the prince, he sailed far out into the open ocean, away from the terrifying coast, and swung back around, bypassing the cape completely. He landed on the other side and found the sea was just as navigable as before. He had proven the monster was just a shadow. It was a monumental psychological breakthrough. The dam of fear had been broken, and now the crawl south could continue. Historians still debate the true balance of Henry's motivations, weighing his supposed scientific curiosity against the clear economic desire to bypass North African middlemen for the gold and slave trades. Because as the ships pushed south, they didn't just find new coastlines, they found new commodities: gold dust, ivory, and, most ominously, people. The capture and enslavement of Africans began almost immediately, a dark stain that spreads alongside the ink of the new maps. For you, watching from the windswept cliffs of Sagres, it is a complex picture. You see the courage and the brilliance, the systematic destruction of ancient fears, but you also see the cold, calculating ambition, the beginning of a process that will enrich one continent at the catastrophic expense of another. The world is getting bigger, but its heart is not. Confidence is a fragile thing, but technology is its most powerful armor. The will to explore, born in the halls of Sagres, is useless without the means to survive the journey. So you leave the world of maps and data and step into the world of wood, rope, and brass. You are now standing on the deck of the machine that will crack the world open, the caravel. It is not an imposing vessel. It's small, almost delicate, compared to the hulking trade cogs of the Mediterranean, rarely more than 70 feet long. but its size is its strength. It is nimble, it is shallow drafted, allowing it to explore upriver and close to unknown coasts. And most importantly, it is a masterpiece of aerodynamic engineering. You look up at the masts. Instead of the big, square sails that are only good for running with the wind at your back, you see triangular lateen sails, a design borrowed from the Arab dhows of the Indian Ocean. This is the secret. This is the key. With these sails, a skilled captain can tack, zigzagging against the wind. It means the wind is no longer your absolute master. It is a force to be negotiated with, outsmarted. It means that a journey south is not a one-way trip into oblivion. It means you can come home. This single innovation is a profound psychological release. The terror of being permanently blown away from the known world begins to recede, replaced by a calculated risk. Historians still argue about the precise fusion of Arab navigational science and European shipbuilding that perfected the caravel, but its impact was undeniable. It transformed the ocean from a wall into a highway. But a ship is only as good as the navigator's ability to know where he is. On the deck, you find the other keys to the ocean. Someone hands you an astrolabe. It is heavier than you expect. A solid disc of brass, etched with intricate lines and degrees. You hold it up by its ring, letting it hang perfectly vertical, and align its sight on the sun at noon, or the North Star at night. By measuring its angle above the horizon, you can determine your latitude, your position north or south of the equator. Imagine the comfort of this. You are surrounded by 1,000 miles of identical, churning water. No landmarks, no signs of life, a terrifying blue desert. Yet this small piece of metal can tell you, with reasonable accuracy, where you are on the vertical axis of the planet. It is a lifeline, a tangible link to the world of order and measurement, a shield against the madness of infinity. Beside the astrolabe is the magnetic compass, its needle quivering but always returning to a single, stubborn truth: north. It is your anchor in a world without direction. But knowing north and your latitude is only half the puzzle. How far east or west have you gone? This is the problem of longitude, and it will not be truly solved for centuries. For now, you must rely on a clever, if imprecise system called dead reckoning. To do this, you need to know your speed. A sailor brings you a small, wedge-shaped piece of wood, the chip log, tied to a long rope with knots tied at regular intervals. He throws the chip overboard. As the ship sails away from it, the rope spools out. Another sailor flips a sandglass, an ampuletta, and for 30 seconds, you count how many knots pass through your fingers. If 5 knots go by, your speed is 5 knots. It's a beautifully simple, tactile system. You are literally feeling your way across the ocean. These tools, the caravel, the astrolabe, the compass, the knotted rope, are more than just equipment. They are a new set of senses, a way of seeing the invisible architecture of the world. They give you the courage to turn your back on the land and trust that you can find your way back. You have the tools and the ship, a masterpiece of design that gives you the confidence to sail into the unknown. But now you must live in it. You step down from the sun-bleached deck into the gloom below, and the reality of this life hits you like a physical blow. The air is thick, a foul cocktail of stagnant bilge water, unwashed bodies, the pungent smell of livestock, and the sharp Thames of Stockholm tar used to waterproof the hull. This is not the grand adventure you imagined. This is a floating, wooden prison. Your world has shrunk to the size of this 70-foot caravel, a space you will share with 40 or 50 other men, not to mention a few chickens, a pig, and a universe of rats and cockroaches. Personal space is a forgotten luxury. You sleep on the hard deck or on a flimsy straw pallet, crammed shoulder to shoulder with your fellow sailors. Their snores and coughs a constant soundtrack to your restless nights. The daily routine is a monotonous cycle of grueling physical labor, governed by the rhythm of the ship's bell and the bite of the bosun's whistle. You are constantly hauling on stiff, wet ropes that chafe your hands raw. climbing the rigging as the ship pitches beneath you, a fall meaning a certain and lonely death in the churning sea. The ship itself is a living thing, constantly groaning and creaking like an old man's bones, a sound that is both a comfort and a constant reminder of the thin wooden shell separating you from the crushing pressure of the deep. There is no privacy, no moment of quiet reflection. Your every action is observed, your every weakness noted. The social structure is as rigid as the ship's mast. The captain is an absolute monarch. His word is law, and disobedience is met with swift and brutal punishment. This tiny, floating world is a psychological crucible, forging intense bonds of camaraderie among some, and simmering resentments among others. And then there is the food. For the first few weeks, it is almost bearable. Salted meat and fish, cheese and beans. But soon, the fresh supplies are gone. The water, stored in wooden casks, grows slimy and tastes of rot. The main staple of your diet becomes ship's biscuit or hardtack. It is a simple flour and water cracker, baked until it is as hard as a rock to prevent spoilage. To eat it, you must soak it in water or wine, and even then, you learn to eat it in the dark. This is because a gentle tap of the biscuit on the table will often reveal a writhing mass of black weevils and maggots that have infested it. The ship's cooks sometimes joked that they added a bit of protein, a culinary opinion you did not share. Starvation is a constant, gnawing presence, a slow erosion of your physical and mental strength. Worse than the hunger is the disease. The spectre that haunts every sailor is scurvy. You have seen it begin. A man's gums become swollen and black, his breath turns foul, his teeth loosen in their sockets until he can pull them out with his fingers. Old, long-healed scars mysteriously reopen as his body's connective tissues dissolve. He becomes lethargic, his joints ache, and a profound depression settles over him before he finally dies. No one understands its cause, this strange wasting sickness from the sea, but everyone fears it. Historians still debate whether these crews were composed mostly of desperate criminals pressed into service or of ambitious young men seeking fortune. But in the end, it makes little difference. Scurvy is the great equalizer. In this wooden world, surrounded by endless water, the true monsters are not the krakens on the map, but the invisible ones that stalk the cramped, dark spaces of the ship and the even darker corners of your own mind. You have been at sea for months. The slow, methodical crawl down the coast of Africa has continued for decades. A relay race of exploration passed from one captain to the next. Now, in the year 1487, you are part of the latest, most ambitious push. Your captain is a stern, determined man named Bartolomeu Dias. His mission, handed down from the Portuguese king himself, is simple and impossible. Find the end of Africa, no matter what. You have already sailed further south than any European before you. The very stars in the sky are alien. The constellations of home have dipped below the northern horizon. The psychological weight of this is immense. You are not just geographically distant, you feel untethered from the world itself, a tiny speck of wood and flesh in God's forgotten backyard. Then the storm hits. It is not a normal storm. It is a living entity of pure, malevolent chaos. For 13 days, you live in a world of screaming wind and perpetual twilight. The sky and the sea merge into a single, churning vortex of grey fury. Waves, the size of small mountains, lift your tiny caravel to their terrifying peaks, holding you there for a heart-stopping moment before plunging you down into a dark abyss. The deck is constantly awash with freezing, violent water. You are soaked to the bone, your hands are numb, your body is a canvas of bruises from being thrown against the ship's timbers. You cannot cook, you cannot sleep, you exist on raw nerves, clinging to a rope, your prayers lost in the deafening roar of the wind. There is no navigation. The astrolabe is useless. The sun is a memory. Dias has ordered the sails furled, and you are driven south, completely at the mercy of the storm, a cork in a maelstrom, and then, as suddenly as it began, it stops. The silence is more jarring than the noise. You are floating on a calm, rolling sea under a cold, clear sky, but you are utterly, terrifyingly lost. Darius orders you to sail east, hoping to find the coast you were torn away from. For days, you sail, and you see nothing, just the endless empty horizon of the ocean. A new kind of fear begins to creep into the hearts of the crew, a fear colder and deeper than the storm's fury. The fear that Africa has simply ended, and that you have been cast out into a new, boundless sea at the bottom of the world. The men are at their breaking point. Their faces are gaunt, their eyes filled with a hollow despair. This is the moment a crew mutinies. Just as the last threads of hope are about to snap, DS makes a decision. He orders a turn to the north, and then you see it. Land, a coastline, but it is different. It is green and lush, and as you follow it, a strange and electrifying realization dawns on you. The coast is no longer trending south, it is heading northeast. You have done it, without even knowing it. The storm that tried to destroy you has accomplished your mission. It blew you so far south that you completely bypassed the tip of the continent. You are in the Indian Ocean. A wave of elation washes over the ship, but it is quickly extinguished by exhaustion and dread. Darius wants to push on to India to complete the ultimate triumph, but his men refuse. They are skeletons held together by willpower, and they have nothing left to give. Historians still debate the exact nature of this confrontation, whether it was a formal mutiny or a desperate collective plea. In the end, the crew wins. You turn for home. It is only on the return journey that you finally see it, the magnificent, towering headland that marks the end of the continent. Darius, remembering the terror that brought you here, names it the Cape of Storms. For you and the crew, it will always be a monument to your survival. While Darius is wrestling with the storms at the bottom of the world, another idea is festering in the courts of Europe. It is an idea so simple, so elegant, and so profoundly wrong that it requires a very specific kind of mind to believe in it. You have left the salt-sprayed docks of Portugal and are now in the perfumed political halls of the Spanish court. Here, the talk is not of inching down a coastline, but of a single audacious leap of faith across the entire ocean. The man championing this idea is an Italian from Genoa, a weaver's son named Cristoforo Colombo, or, as you know him, Christopher Columbus. You watch him from the back of the crowded court, and he does not look like the other courtiers. He is a tall man with a shock of prematurely white hair and an intensity in his pale blue eyes that borders on mania. He is a man possessed by his theory. His proposal is this: why struggle south around the massive African continent when the world is a sphere? To reach the east, one must simply sail west. It is a moment of beautiful, spherical logic. The problem is, everyone with an education already knows the world is a sphere. The ancient Greeks had calculated its circumference with remarkable accuracy centuries ago. The issue isn't the shape of the planet, it's the size. The experts at court, the royal cosmographers, have done the math. They tell him, and the monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, that the ocean between Europe and Asia is simply too vast. A voyage of that length is impossible. The ships would run out of food and water long before they ever saw land. It is a suicide mission. But Columbus has his own math. You learn that he has a well-worn copy of Marco Polo's Travels, its margins filled with his frantic, spidery handwriting. He has read the accounts of a vast eastern extension of Asia. He has consulted the flawed maps of the geographer Toscanelli. He has cherry-picked data from every available source, ancient and modern, that supports his theory, and discarded everything that contradicts it. It is a perfect, textbook case of confirmation bias. He dramatically underestimates the circumference of the Earth, while simultaneously overestimating the size of the Asian continent. In his mind, Japan is located somewhere around the modern-day Caribbean islands. His calculations were, to put it mildly, creatively optimistic. He has shrunk the world to fit the size of his ambition. For nearly a decade, he has been a professional pest, a relentless lobbyist, haunting the courts of Europe. He went to Portugal first, but King John's experts saw the flaws in his geography and sent him away. Now, he is making his pitch in Spain. For years, they too have put him off, distracted by their long and bloody war to reconquer the last Muslim kingdom in Spain, Granada. But now, in 1492, the war is over. The Spanish monarchs are flush with victory, bursting with religious fervor and a competitive need to catch up to their Portuguese rivals. Columbus, this obsessive foreigner with the crazy idea, arrives at the perfect psychological moment. He is not just selling a trade route, he is selling a destiny. He speaks of untold riches, of millions of souls to be converted to Christianity, of a divine mission for which he believes he has been personally chosen by God. Historians still debate whether Columbus was a genuine zealot who truly believed his flawed calculations, or a brilliant salesman who knew he was exaggerating to get his project funded. In the end, it doesn't matter. His unshakable self-belief is contagious. Isabella, moved by his passion, or perhaps just intrigued by the small gamble for an enormous potential prize, finally agrees. He is granted 3 small ships, a crew of misfits and debtors, and a license to sail west until he hits India. You are on the deck of the Santa Maria, 2 months out from Spain, and the mood has turned venomous. The ocean is no longer a road, it is a prison. The same steady trade winds that pushed you west with such exhilarating speed now seem like a divine curse, a one-way ticket to oblivion. How will you ever sail back against them? You have been at sea longer than anyone has ever been out of sight of land. The crew, a collection of hardened sailors and pardoned criminals, is a powder keg of fear and superstition. You hear them whispering in the dark, their voices low and mutinous. They talk of turning the ships around, of throwing the mad Italian captain overboard and taking their chances sailing for home. Columbus is aware of the simmering rebellion. He is a master of psychological manipulation. You know that he keeps 2 separate logbooks. One contains the true, terrifying distance you have sailed. The other, the one he shows to the crew, is a fiction, shaving off miles every day to make the journey seem shorter, to keep the fragile thread of hope from snapping completely. It is a brilliant and desperate deception, but even his lies are wearing thin. He has promised them land in a matter of days, a promise he has made before. The tension is unbearable. Every passing cloud on the horizon is mistaken for a coastline. Every flock of birds a sign of imminent salvation. Each one a fresh spike of hope that is brutally crushed by the reality of another empty dawn. Then, on the 10th of October, the signs become undeniable. A branch, still green with leaves, and covered in some kind of flower, floats past the ship. You see a carved stick, clearly worked by a human hand. The air itself feels different, heavier, smelling of earth and damp vegetation. The mood on the ship transforms from mutinous despair to a frantic, electric anticipation. Columbus promises a silk doublet and a handsome reward from the monarchs to the first man who sights land. That night, no one sleeps. You are all lining the rails, your eyes straining, piercing the darkness, willing the world to finally appear. Around 10 o'clock, Columbus himself, standing on the stern castle, claims he saw a light, a flicker of a candle rising and falling in the distance. Was it real, or just the product of his exhausted, obsessive mind? At 2 in the morning, on October 12th, a cry shatters the night. It comes from the lookout on the faster, smaller Pinta, sailing ahead of you. A man named Rodrigo de Trianantierra. Tiara, land, land. The single word is an explosion. Men are shouting, weeping, embracing each other, falling to their knees to thank God. The long nightmare is over. As the dawn breaks, you see it clearly. A low green island, fringed with white sand beaches and dense with trees unlike any you have ever seen. It is paradise. When you finally go ashore in the longboat, the sand soft beneath your boots. Columbus, dressed in his finest scarlet, falls to his knees and kisses the ground. He plants the royal flag of Spain, claiming this land, and all the people on it, for a king and queen an ocean away. And then they appear. They emerge cautiously from the trees, the people of this new world. They are the Taino. They are unlike anyone you have ever seen, with handsome features, copper-colored skin, and no clothes. They carry no weapons. They look at your ships, your strange clothes, and your pale skin with a mixture of awe and fear. In their eyes, you are beings from another universe. Columbus notes in his log that they seem gentle, intelligent, and would make excellent servants. He offers them red caps and glass beads, which they accept with childlike delight, and in return, they offer him parrots and balls of cotton. You see a few of them wear small, hammered ornaments of gold in their noses. Gold. The word electrifies the air, but as you look into their bewildered, curious faces, a profound and unsettling thought occurs to you. You believe you've discovered them, but from their perspective, it is they who have just discovered you. Historians and anthropologists still debate the precise nature of that first encounter, trying to reconstruct the silent, bewildered thoughts of the Taino people as their universe was invaded. The world has just collided with itself, and it will never be the same. The news of Columbus's return spreads like wildfire across Europe. You are back in Spain, watching as he parades through the streets of Barcelona, not as a madman, but as a conquering hero. He brings with him exotic parrots with feathers like jewels, strange plants, and most importantly, a handful of terrified Taino people, living proof of a new human world. He presents his findings to Ferdinand and Isabella, painting a picture of a paradise overflowing with gold, a land ripe for conversion and conquest. Spain is euphoric. They have gambled on a lunatic and won the world. But across the border in Portugal, the news is received not with celebration, but with cold fury. King John II of Portugal is no fool. He listens to Columbus's report, examines the crude maps, and realizes with a sickening certainty that these new islands, this Indies, might fall within the territory granted to Portugal by the Pope in previous decrees. A geopolitical crisis erupts. It is a conflict born of a map that is still mostly blank. Portugal has spent the better part of a century painstakingly charting the African coast, a monumental effort secured by a series of papal bulls, edicts from the Pope himself, granting them a monopoly on all lands discovered south and east towards India. Now, Spain has just executed a brilliant end run, an audacious westward shortcut that threatens to unravel everything Portugal has worked for. Ambassadors are dispatched. Tense letters are exchanged. For a moment, it feels like the two greatest naval powers on Earth might go to war over islands that neither of them can reliably find again on a map. To prevent this, they turn to the only authority they both recognize as being above kings: the Pope. The current pontiff is Alexander VI, a Spaniard from the infamous Borgia family, a man known more for his political cunning and his scandalous personal life than for his piety. In 1493, he issues a series of bulls to settle the matter. You can almost picture him, a single man in a lavish chamber in Rome, taking it upon himself to adjudicate the ownership of the entire planet. He takes a map of the world, a sphere of frightening voids and vague coastlines, and with the divine authority he believes he possesses, he draws a line. It is a stroke of breathtaking arrogance. The line runs from the North Pole to the South Pole, positioned 100 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. All lands discovered to the west of this line, he declares, belong to Spain. All lands to the east belong to Portugal. It is a deceptively simple solution, but it is also a declaration that the world and all the non-Christian people in it are the property of Europe, to be carved up and distributed like a cake. King John of Portugal is not satisfied. He is a shrewd operator and suspects, correctly, that this line gives Spain too much. It might even interfere with his ships' wide, sweeping routes down the Atlantic on their way to Africa. So he does something remarkable. He opens direct negotiations with Spain to move the Pope's line. Imagine the scene: diplomats from both kingdoms, hunched over a table in the small Spanish town of Tordesillas. They are not just negotiating a border, they are dividing the future. After months of tense back and forth, they reach an agreement. On June 7, 1494, they sign the Treaty of Tordesillas. They agree to move the line further west, to a meridian 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. This one small change will have staggering consequences. By pushing the line west, they have unknowingly included the eastern bulge of the South American continent on Portugal's side. A few years later, when a Portuguese fleet under Pedro Alvares Cabral is blown off course on its way to India, it will land on the coast of what you now know as Brazil, and they will be able to claim it legally. According to this very treaty, historians still debate whether the Portuguese secretly knew of Brazil's existence before 1500 and Canoli negotiated for its inclusion, or if it was simply the luckiest accident in geopolitical history. Either way, with the stroke of a pen, the fate of a continent was sealed. For you, the treaty is the ultimate symbol of the psychology of this age. It is the moment when exploration ceases to be about discovery and becomes an exercise in possession, a formal, legalistic process of claiming a world that was never lost to the people who already lived there. The ink on the Treaty of Tordesillas is barely dry, and you are back at sea, this time under the Portuguese flag. The year is 1497. The mission is no longer to find the edge of a continent, but to finally reach the source. The psychological pressure on this voyage is different. Diaz proved the door was there. Now you have to kick it open. Your captain is Vasco da Gama, a man who does not possess Columbus's mystical self-assurance, but instead has a core of granite resolve and a capacity for calculated brutality that will define the next phase of this age. His fleet is small, just for ships, but they have been purpose-built for this journey, packed with the best navigational tools, the most experienced pilots, and, most importantly, an arsenal of cannons. This is not just an expedition, it is an armed negotiation in waiting. The journey is a new kind of hell. You follow the path Diaz blazed, rounding the Cape of Storms, which the king has optimistically renamed the Cape of Good Hope. But then you must push north, up the unknown eastern coast of Africa, into the sweltering, unfamiliar waters of the Indian Ocean. The journey takes far longer than anyone anticipated. You spend more than 3 months in the open sea, a new record of terrifying isolation. Scurvy, the old ghost, returns with a vengeance. You watch as your shipmates wither and die, their bodies rotting from the inside out. By the time you reach the coast of modern-day Mozambique, more than half of the crew is dead or dying. It is a voyage forged in suffering, and it hardens the hearts of those who survive. As you sail north along the Swahili coast, you encounter a world that shatters your European preconceptions. These are not the simple, unclothed people Columbus met in the Caribbean. You sail into bustling, sophisticated port cities like Mombasa and Malindi. You see tall stone houses, wealthy merchants dressed in fine silks, and mosques that rise elegantly against the blue sky. Most significantly, you see the ships, not the caravels you are used to, but large Arab dhows that have been plying these trade routes for centuries. The Indian Ocean is not an empty sea waiting to be discovered. It is a thriving, ancient network of commerce, a freeway of trade connecting Africa, Arabia, Persia, and India. You are not the first to arrive, you are just the latest, and frankly, you are seen as rather crude and insignificant interlopers. The turning point comes in Malinde da Gama, realizing he is utterly out of his depth in these complex political and navigational waters, makes a pragmatic decision. He needs a guide. After a mix of diplomacy and intimidation, he secures the services of the most famous Muslim navigator of his time. Historians still debate the identity of this pilot, with many believing it was the legendary Ahmad ibn Majid, author of famous sailing manuals. Regardless of his name, this man possesses a knowledge of the monsoon winds and the star charts of the Indian Ocean that is almost magical to you. He boards your ship, unrolls his own intricate maps, and with a quiet confidence, he shows you the way. He guides you away from the coast, into the open ocean, catching the seasonal monsoon wind that will blow you directly to your destination. After 23 days of perfect sailing, you smell it on the wind, a scent of cinnamon, cloves, and damp earth. You have arrived in Calicut, on the coast of India, the spice capital of the world. But the psychological shock here is even greater than in Africa. The local ruler, the Zamorin, receives Da Gama in a court of astonishing wealth. He sees men adorned with enormous jewels, surrounded by a level of luxury that makes the courts of Europe look provincial. Da Gama presents his gifts, the things he thought would impress a native chieftain: bolts of woolen cloth, strings of coral beads, and some wash basins. The Zamorin's courtiers laugh. The Arab merchants who control the spice trade here mock the Portuguese for their poverty. The Zamorin informs Da Gama that if he wants spices, he will pay for them in gold, like everyone else. Da Gama has sailed halfway around the world, through storms and disease, only to be treated like a cheap, vagrant peddler. The humiliation is total. He cannot compete economically, so he resorts to the one advantage he has: violence. Before leaving, he seizes several local fishermen and merchants as hostages. It is a small act, but it signals a monumental shift. The age of pure exploration is over. The age of armed trade, of piracy and cannon point diplomacy has just begun. You are back in a European port, and the air is thick with confusion. A strange duality has settled over the public consciousness. On the one hand, you have the reports from Vasco da Gama. He has returned from the East a hero, his surviving ships laden with the actual pungent, unbelievably valuable spices of India. His stories are of ancient civilizations, sophisticated trade networks, and powerful rulers. He found what everyone was looking for, precisely where they expected it to be. On the other hand, you have the ongoing reports from the West. Columbus and the explorers who followed him keep returning with tales of primitive islands, parrots, a little gold, and a persistent, almost desperate, insistence that they have found the back door to Asia. But the pieces do not fit. The people, the plants, the geography, none of it matches the detailed accounts of Marco Polo. The world is holding two contradictory truths in its hands, and the cognitive dissonance is becoming unbearable. Into this confusion steps a man who is not a great captain or a conquistador, but a Florentine merchant and navigator named Amerigo Vespucci. He is an unlikely figure to solve this cosmic riddle. He is middle-aged, thoughtful, and possesses a keen eye for detail and, more importantly, a remarkable gift for writing. He has participated in several voyages to the lands discovered by Columbus, first for Spain, then for Portugal, and unlike Columbus, who was psychologically locked into his theory that this was Asia, Vespucci sails with an open mind. His journey takes him far south, down the impossibly long coast of what you now know as Brazil and Argentina. For weeks, then months, the land just keeps going. He sees new constellations in the southern sky. He meticulously documents the unique flora and fauna, and he observes the customs of the indigenous people with an almost anthropological curiosity. The sheer, relentless scale of this coastline is what triggers the revelation in his mind. He measures his progress, he consults his charts, and he comes to a staggering conclusion. The landmass he is charting is enormous, far larger than any island. It extends much further south than Asia was ever thought to. This cannot be a peninsula of India or a cluster of islands off the coast of China. This has to be something else entirely, something new, a fourth part of the world, a continent previously unknown to all of ancient and modern geography. It is one of the most profound intellectual leaps in human history, a moment when one man looked at the evidence and dared to believe his own eyes instead of 1,000 years of established doctrine. But Vespucci's greatest skill was not sailing, it was storytelling. While Columbus's official reports were dry and guarded, Vespucci wrote a series of letters about his travels that were vivid, sensational, and immensely popular. They became international bestsellers, translated into multiple languages, and passed from hand to hand. He described the new continent as a terrestrial paradise, but he also filled his accounts with juicy, sometimes exaggerated details about the local inhabitants, their communal living, their strange diets, and their shockingly liberal sexual customs. It was this narrative flair that captured the European imagination. For the first time, the public had a compelling, readable vision of this new place. Historians still debate whether Vespucci was a brilliant self-promoter who cleverly exaggerated his own importance, or a genuinely more astute observer who simply understood the cosmic significance of the discovery before anyone else. The final piece of the puzzle falls into place not on a ship, but in a quiet print shop in a small German town. In 1507, a cartographer named Martin Waldsimler is creating a new, ambitious map of the world to incorporate all these recent discoveries. He has read Vespucci's thrilling accounts, convinced that Vespucci was the true visionary who recognized the existence of this new continent. Waldsimler makes a suggestion in the text accompanying his map. He proposes that this new fourth part of the world be named in honor of its intellectual discoverer, Americus Vespucius. And so, he labels the southern continent with a single, elegant word, America. It is the first time the name has ever appeared on a map, and it sticks. Through the power of the printing press, Waldsimler's map is widely distributed, and the name becomes permanent. A new world has not only been found, but it has finally been christened. Not for the conqueror who first stumbled upon it, but for the storyteller who first defined it. The world now has a new name, America, but for you, an ambitious and often desperate man on the ground. It is not a destination, it is a barrier, a colossal, inconvenient roadblock placed by God between you and the real prize, the spices and silks of Asia. The question that now consumes every captain and courtier is no longer what this new land is, but how to get around it or through it. You are in the fledgling Spanish colonies of the Caribbean, a chaotic, disease-ridden frontier where fortunes are made and lost with brutal speed. And it is here that you encounter Vasco Núñez de Balboa. He is not a courtly navigator like Columbus or a methodical organizer like Prince Henry. He is a pure product of this new world, a man of action, a fighter, and, as it happens, a failed pig farmer who had to escape his creditors in Hispaniola by stowing away in a barrel aboard a supply ship. It is a rather undignified start for a man who is about to change the map of the world forever. Through a combination of charisma, ruthlessness, and sheer luck, Balboa has risen to become the leader of a struggling colony in what is now Panama. It is a miserable place, a steaming, swampy isthmus of land connecting the two great continents. The air is thick enough to drink, the insects are a constant torment, and tropical fevers thin the ranks of the colonists with terrifying efficiency. But this narrow strip of land is also a hotbed of rumors. You hear the local indigenous people speak of a great sea on the other side of the mountains, and of a kingdom to the south, so rich that its people eat and drink from plates and goblets of pure gold. During one tense encounter, a local chief's son, tired of the Spaniards' endless, obsessive squabbling over a few gold trinkets, contemptuously knocks the scales from their hands. He tells them if they are so hungry for gold, he will show them a land and an ocean that will satisfy their lusts forever. For Balboa, this is a chance at immortality. He gathers a force of just under 200 Spaniards and over 1,000 indigenous allies and porters, and in September of 1513, he plunges into the jungle. This is a new kind of exploration, and a new kind of hell. You are a sailor, a man of open spaces and wide horizons, and the jungle is a claustrophobic, vertical prison. The heat is suffocating. Giant trees form a dense canopy that blots out the sun, casting the forest floor in a perpetual, humid twilight. You are hacking your way through a wall of green with every step, your clothes rotting on your back, your skin a tapestry of insect bites. You are tormented by snakes, jaguars, and hostile tribes who fight with poisoned arrows. You are not sailing, you are wading, climbing, and crawling through a world that feels actively hostile to your existence. After 3 weeks of this nightmare, your indigenous guides tell you that you are near the peak of a mountain range from which the other sea can be seen. Balboa, with a flair for the dramatic, orders his exhausted, mud-caked men to halt. He will climb the final stretch alone. You watch as he scrambles up the last ridge. He reaches the top, and he simply stops. He stands there, silhouetted against the sky, utterly still. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then he turns and gestures for the others to join him. You drag your weary body up the final slope, and you see what he sees. Below you, the jungle falls away, and beyond it, stretching to the curve of the earth, is an endless, shimmering, blue expanse of water. It is perfectly calm, so vast and serene it seems to swallow all sound. After the noisy, suffocating chaos of the jungle, the sheer scale and silence of it is a physical shock. It is the largest single feature on the planet, and you are the first Europeans to ever lay eyes on it. A few days later, you reach the shore. Balboa, clad in full armor, wades out into the gentle surf. In one hand he holds a sword, in the other, the banner of Castile. With the water up to his thighs, he solemnly, almost absurdly, claims the entire ocean and all the lands and islands that touch it for the crown of Spain. He names it the Mar del Sur, the South Sea. Historians still debate whether Balboa's moment of visionary triumph can be separated from his record as a ruthless and often brutal colonial governor. But in that moment, knee-deep in a silent sea, he has answered one great question and asked an even bigger one. You have found the other side. Now, how do you cross it? The discovery of the South Sea, the Pacific Ocean, creates a new kind of psychological obsession. The map is agonizingly incomplete. You have Europe on one side, this new continent of America in the middle, and the vast, silent sea on the other. Somewhere, there must be a strait, a narrow passage of water that connects the two great oceans, a way to sail through America rather than around it. Finding this passage, El Paso becomes the new holy grail of exploration, and the man who becomes most consumed by this quest is a Portuguese navigator named Ferdinand Magellan. He is a veteran of the bloody spice wars in the East, a hardened, taciturn man with a limp from a battle wound and a burning sense of grievance against the Portuguese king who has refused to recognize his service. So, he does what Columbus did before him. He switches allegiance and takes his grand, world-changing idea to Spain. His proposal is audacious. He tells the young Spanish king, Charles V, that the Spice Islands, the fabulously wealthy source of cloves and nutmeg, actually lie on the Spanish side of the line established by the Treaty of Tordesillas. He believes he can prove it by sailing west, finding the undiscovered strait through America, crossing Balboa's newly discovered sea, and claiming the islands for Spain once and for all. It is a plan of breathtaking scope, a true circumnavigation of the globe. The Spanish king, eager to one-up the Portuguese, agrees. In 1519, Magellan sets sail with a fleet of 5 old, barely seaworthy ships and a crew of about 270 men, a motley collection of sailors from across Europe. You are on board, and from the very beginning, the voyage is plagued by a deep, corrosive mistrust. The Spanish captains, under Magellan's command, resent serving a Portuguese commander, and Magellan himself is secretive and authoritarian, sharing his plans with no one. The search for the strait is a grueling, soul-destroying process. You sail for months down the coast of South America, probing every river mouth and bay, each one a flash of hope that turns into the bitter disappointment of a dead end. The weather grows colder, the food supplies dwindle, and the grumbling of the crew deepens into open hostility. Finally, Magellan decides to winter in a bleak, freezing bay he calls Port St. Julian. It is here that the simmering tensions explode into a full-blown mutiny. 3 of his 5 captains rise up against him. Magellan's response is swift and utterly ruthless. He has one of the mutinous captains stabbed to death, another is beheaded, and their bodies are drawn and quartered and displayed on gibbets as a warning to the rest. 2 other ringleaders, including a high-ranking Spanish official, are simply marooned, left to die on the desolate Patagonian coast. The message is clear: this voyage will succeed, or everyone will die trying. Pressing on, in October of 1520, you finally find it, a narrow, treacherous-looking opening in the coastline. For 38 days, you navigate the labyrinthine passage that will come to be known as the Strait of Magellan. It is a navigator's nightmare, a place of violent, unpredictable winds, jagged cliffs, and confusing dead-end channels. One of your ships deserts and sails back to Spain, its crew convinced the voyage is doomed. But Magellan pushes on, and then you emerge. You are in a new ocean. It is so vast, so calm and peaceful after the fury of the strait, that Magellan weeps and names it the Mar Pacifico, the Pacific Ocean. But the relief is short-lived. The Pacific is not the small sea he had imagined. It is a void. For 99 days, you sail without seeing land, save for 2 small, uninhabited islands. The crew is driven to the absolute extremity of human suffering. Scurvy returns with a vengeance. The ship's biscuit has turned to dust and weevils. You are eating sawdust mixed with rat droppings. You chew on leather rigging, softened in seawater, to stay alive. The rats themselves become a delicacy, sold for a high price. Men die every day, their bodies unceremoniously dropped into the vast, indifferent ocean. When you finally reach the island of Guam, and then the Philippines, it feels like a resurrection. But it is here that Magellan's obsession proves fatal. Instead of focusing on his mission to reach the Spice Islands, he gets entangled in local politics, attempting to convert the natives to Christianity and establish Spanish authority. He agrees to lead a small force to subdue a defiant chieftain named Lapu-Lapu. It is a foolish, arrogant decision. On the beaches of Mactan Island, Magellan and his men are overwhelmed by a much larger force. You watch in horror as your iron-willed captain is speared and hacked to death. It is a pathetic, ignominious end to a man of such monumental vision. Historians still debate whether Magellan's fatal flaw was his religious zeal or his military overconfidence. The survivors, leaderless and demoralized, eventually find the Spice Islands, load up with clothes, and under the command of the stoic Juan Sebastian Elcano, they continue west. In September of 1522, almost 3 years after you left, a single, battered ship, the Victoria, limps into a Spanish harbor. Of the 270 men who set out, only 18 have returned. You are one of them. You have survived hell, but you have also done the impossible. You have proven, with your own bodies, that the world is round. The return of the Victoria, the ghost ship from Magellan's fleet, does more than just prove the world is round. It recalibrates the European mind. The globe is no longer a theoretical concept. It is a known quantity, a sphere that can be encompassed, measured, and therefore owned. This realization gives birth to a new kind of man, a new kind of ambition. You are now in the Spanish port of Seville, the gateway to the New World, and you see them everywhere. They are not like the sailors of Prince Henry's era, nor are they like the merchant navigators of Columbus's generation. These are different men. They are often minor nobles, younger sons with no inheritance to look forward to, or hardened veterans of the Spanish wars against the Moors. They are men with scarred hands and a particular kind of hunger in their eyes, a hunger for gold, glory, and God. and they are not terribly concerned about the order in which they acquire them. They are the conquistadors. You follow one of them, a man of cunning intelligence and boundless ambition named Hernán Cortés. In 1519, he lands on the coast of Mexico with a small force of about 500 men, a handful of horses, and a few primitive cannons. He soon hears tales of a magnificent empire in the interior. The Aztec civilization ruled from a golden city of unimaginable wealth. What follows is not a simple battle, but a masterclass in psychological warfare. You watch as Cortés masterfully exploits local political rivalries, forging alliances with tribes who have been brutally subjugated by the Aztecs. He is not just a soldier, he is a politician and a showman. He uses his horses and cannons, creatures and weapons never before seen in this land, to create an aura of divine power and terror. When he finally reaches the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, you are struck dumb by the sight. It is a city of dreams, larger than any in Europe, a shimmering metropolis of pyramids and palaces built on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the shore by great causeways. The emperor, Moctezuma II, receives him with a cautious, almost fearful reverence. The traditional story you hear is that Moctezuma believed Cortés was the returning god Quetzalcoatl, a prophecy that paralyzed the Aztec response. Historians still debate this, with many modern scholars arguing it was a narrative invented after the conquest to explain the inexplicable, a way for the Spanish to legitimize their improbable victory. Whatever the truth, Cortés exploits the emperor's indecision, takes him hostage within his own palace, and attempts to rule the empire through him. The situation is impossibly tense. A handful of Spaniards in the heart of a city of hundreds of thousands. To ensure his own men do not lose their nerve and retreat to the coast, Cortés makes a decision of legendary audacity. He orders his own ships to be scuttled. He burns his bridges to the old world. For his men, there is now no escape. It is victory or death. Further south, another conquistador, a distant cousin of Cortés named Francisco Pizarro, hears tales of an even richer empire in the Andes. Pizarro is an older, more brutish man, an illiterate former swineherd, driven by a lifetime of perceived slights and a ferocious desire for wealth. In 1532, he marches into the heart of the Inca Empire with a force so small it is almost laughable, just 168 men. He arranges a meeting with the Inca Emperor, Atahualpa, who arrives in the town square of Cajamarca, carried on a golden litter, surrounded by thousands of his lightly armed retainers. Atahualpa is a living god to his people, the absolute center of their universe. He is utterly confident, almost disdainful of this tiny band of ragged, bearded foreigners. Then Pizarro springs his trap. His men, hidden in the surrounding buildings, open fire with their arquebuses and cannons. The cavalry charges into the terrified, unarmed crowd. It is a massacre, a calculated act of terror. In the chaos, Pizarro himself seizes Atahualpa. In a matter of minutes, he has decapitated the empire by capturing its divine head. The psychological shock from which the Inca will never recover is profound. The sheer boldness of these acts is the defining characteristic of the conquistador, a belief in their own destiny so powerful that it allows them to gamble against impossible odds. Armed with the potent weapons of steel, germs, and an unshakable, terrifying sense of superiority, you have seen the conquest of empires by force of arms, a story of steel and gunpowder. But as you stand on the docks of Veracruz or Lima, you realize you have been watching the wrong war. The most powerful and transformative consequence of this age is not the gold being loaded onto the ships, but the life forms being loaded on and off, often completely by accident. The ships that now crisscross the Atlantic are not just treasure galleons, they are biological arcs in reverse, spilling their contents into a world that is utterly unprepared for them. For millennia, the Eastern and Western hemispheres have been two separate laboratories, two sealed glass jars, each with its own perfectly balanced ecosystem of plants, animals, and microbes. Now, you are witnessing the moment those jars are smashed together, and their contents are mixed in the largest, most chaotic, and most consequential biological experiment in human history. It is called the Columbian Exchange. First, you watch what comes from the old world. A horse is led down a gangplank, its hooves clattering on the wooden dock. To the Spanish, it is a tool of war, a mobile platform of terror that gives a single soldier the power of a minor god. But to the indigenous people, it is a revelation. Once the initial fear subsides, they will adopt it, master it, and it will revolutionize their cultures, transforming hunters on foot into the great horse nations of the plains. Behind the horse comes a squealing, grunting parade of pigs. They are the ultimate invasive species, relentless walking stomachs that will escape into the wild, breed at a phenomenal rate, and tear up native landscapes with their snouts, forever altering the ecology. Cattle and sheep follow, turning forests into pasture land, a slow-motion terraforming of the American continent to make it look more like Spain. Wheat is planted, the grain of the Eucharist, allowing the colonists to eat their daily bread and feel at home in a strange new land. Sugarcane cuttings are planted in the Caribbean islands, creating vast plantations that will become the economic engine of empire, an engine that will soon be fueled by the forced labor of millions of enslaved Africans. But there is another cargo, an invisible one, that slips ashore unnoticed. It travels in the breath, the blood, and the blankets of the Europeans. It is an army of microbes: smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus. These are diseases that have swept through Europe, Asia, and Africa for centuries, and the populations there have built up a degree of immunity through brutal natural selection. But in the Americas, these diseases have never existed. The people have no defenses. It is like watching a fire sweep through a dry forest. The microbes march out from the ports and race through the continent faster than the conquistadors themselves, transmitted along native trade routes, heralding the arrival of the Europeans with a wave of death. Whole villages are wiped out. The great cities of the Aztec and Inca empires, already reeling from conquest, are hollowed out by plague. It is the Great Dying, a demographic catastrophe with no parallel in human history. An estimated 90% of the indigenous population perishes in the century and a half after first contact. It is not an intended genocide. It is something worse, an accidental, biological apocalypse. But the exchange is a two-way street. You board a ship heading back to Europe, and in its hold are the botanical treasures of the New World. You see a lumpy, unattractive tuber from the Andes, the potato. In Europe, it will be met with suspicion, considered unfit for human consumption. But eventually, it will become a staple food that will end the cycle of famine in Northern Europe and fuel a population boom. There are sacks of maize, a miracle grain that will feed millions. You see crates of tomatoes, which will be grown as ornamental curiosities in Italy for years before someone bravely decides to eat one, and in doing so, accidentally invents the national cuisine. There are chili peppers that will add fire to the food of India and Thailand, vanilla beans, and the bitter cacao that will be mixed with sugar to become chocolate. The new addiction of European aristocrats. The only significant animal to make the journey east is the turkey, a creature Benjamin Franklin would later propose as the national bird of the United States. And there is one more stowaway, a dark mirror to the diseases of Europe. A new sickness begins to appear in European ports, a venereal disease of terrifying virulence. Historians fiercely debate whether syphilis was truly a New World import or a mutation of an existing Old World disease. But its sudden and devastating appearance is forever linked to the return of the first sailors. The menu of the entire planet has been rewritten. The landscapes have been changed. The populations have been scrambled and shattered. This is the true legacy of the age of exploration, a permanent, irreversible mixing of the world's life, for better and for worse. While Spain and Portugal are busy plundering the golden empires of the south, a different kind of obsession is taking hold in the colder, greyer corners of Europe. In the courts of England, France, and the Netherlands, the maps of the New World are studied with a mixture of envy and frustration. You are in a smoky London tavern, listening to sailors and merchants complain. The Spanish controlled the southern route to Asia, the Portuguese controlled the eastern route around Africa, and the Pope has sanctioned both. The northern European powers are locked out of the great game. Their only hope is to find a third way, a passage that the Iberian powers have overlooked. They look at the top of their globes and see a tantalizing possibility. A northern route to China, a northwest passage. This is not a quest for warm lands and easy gold. It is a grim, brutal affair, a battle against the single, implacable enemy of ice. You join an expedition under the command of an English captain, a man like Martin Frobisher or Henry Hudson. The ships are different, stout and reinforced, their hulls sheathed in extra layers of timber to withstand the crushing pressure of the ice floes. The men are different too, wrapped in thick wool and furs, their faces weathered not by a tropical sun, but by a wind that feels like it is laced with powdered glass. As you sail north, the world is bled of its color. The lush green of England gives way to the stark gray of rock and the blinding white of snow and ice. The sun becomes a weak, distant disk in the sky. The very concept of a day changes, stretching into a long, perpetual twilight in the winter, and an equally disorienting, endless daylight in the summer. The search itself is a unique kind of psychological torment. You are navigating a ghost world, a labyrinth of islands and channels that all look unnervingly the same. The magnetic compass, your anchor of certainty in other seas, becomes erratic and unreliable this close to the magnetic pole. You are constantly chasing mirages, mistaking fog banks for headlands and icebergs for islands. An opening that looks like the entrance to the passage will lead you deep into a frozen bay, an ice trap from which you might never escape. The ice itself is a living monster. You hear it constantly, a symphony of creaks, groans, and explosive cracks that sound like cannon fire. You watch as giant icebergs, mountains of frozen ancient water, drift silently past your ship, their sheer scale a humbling reminder of your own insignificance. The greatest fear is being caught. You see it happen. The sea, which was open water just hours before, begins to congeal, turning into a thick, slushy soup. Then, the floes close in, grinding against the hull of your ship with a sound that travels through the wood and into your bones. The ship is lifted, groaning in protest, held fast in the ice's grip. You are now a part of the landscape, frozen in place for the long, Arctic winter. The darkness descends. For months, the sun is just a faint glow on the southern horizon. The cold is a physical presence, so intense it feels like it is trying to leech the very life out of you. You huddle below decks, the condensation from your breath freezing on the timbers. Scurvy returns, but it is joined by frostbite, which blackens your fingers and toes. A profound, crushing depression, a kind of madness born of darkness and confinement, settles over the crew. You have sailed to the top of the world only to find a frozen, white hell. Again and again they tried. Frobisher, Davis, Hudson, Baffin. They pushed further and further into the Canadian archipelago, their voyages a litany of suffering and heroic endurance. They mistook a vast bay for the Pacific Ocean, a tragic error that would lead Henry Hudson to be cast adrift in a small boat by his mutinous crew, left to die in the icy wilderness that now bears his name. One eccentric curiosity of these voyages was the fool's gold brought back by Frobisher. He returned to England with over 1,000 tons of worthless iron pyrite, having convinced himself and his investors it was gold, or a testament to the powerful wishful thinking of the age. Historians still debate whether the relentless search for the passage was driven more by a genuine belief in its existence or by a desperate national need to compete with the riches of Spain. For you, trapped in the ice, it doesn't matter. You have found the absolute limit of the known world, a place where the human ambition to explore collides with the planet's most unforgiving and indifferent power. The failed freezing voyagers in search of a northwest passage force a psychological shift in the English mindset. If you cannot find your own route to the riches of the world, you will simply take them from the nation that has. You are now on the deck of a sleek, fast, and heavily armed ship in the English port of Plymouth. The atmosphere is different from the grand, state-sponsored expeditions of Spain. It is more secretive, more predatory. The line between exploration and piracy becomes not just blurred, but erased entirely. This is the era of the sea dogs, the privateers, and their undisputed king is a man from Devon named Francis Drake. He is the perfect embodiment of this new age for England, a brilliant navigator, a charismatic leader, and a man with a near-religious devotion to two things: Protestantism and plundering Spanish treasure. Drake is a privateer, not a pirate. It is a crucial, if subtle, distinction. A pirate is an outlaw, at war with all nations. A privateer has a letter of marque, an official license from their government. In this case, Queen Elizabeth I, authorizing them to attack and seize the ships of an enemy state. It is state-sanctioned, royally approved piracy. Queen Elizabeth, perpetually short of funds and eager to chip away at the power of Catholic Spain, secretly invests in Drake's voyages. She can profit from his plunder while maintaining a thin veil of plausible deniability, publicly disavowing his actions if they become too politically inconvenient. It is a shrewd and cynical game, and Drake is its most masterful player. You sail with Drake on his most famous voyage, which begins in 1577. The official mission is to explore the coast of South America and seek out trade opportunities. But everyone on board, including you, knows the real purpose. You are going to hunt the Spanish treasure fleet. After crossing the Atlantic, you navigate the treacherous Strait of Magellan, becoming only the second expedition in history to do so. A furious storm then blows you far south, revealing that the landmass of Tierra del Fuego is not part of a great southern continent, as was believed, but an island. Drake has just redrawn the map of the world at its very bottom. But discovery is a side project. You now turn north into the Pacific Ocean. This is Spain's private lake. Their ports are lightly defended. Their ships are fat with silver and unarmed, because no one has ever dared to attack them here. What follows is a campaign of audacious, almost comical looting. You sail up the coasts of Chile and Peru, raiding port after port, taking the Spanish completely by surprise. They see a ship on the horizon and assume it is one of their own until it is too late. The stories of Drake's exploits become legendary. He captures one ship so laden with silver from the mines of Potosi that it takes 4 days to transfer the cargo. Off the coast of Ecuador, you capture the treasure galleon Cacafugo. The name, which politely translates to Spitfire, becomes a source of great amusement for Drake's crew. Its hold contains a staggering fortune in silver bars, gold, and jewels. Drake is so delighted he dines with the Spanish captain, gives him gifts, and sets him free. It is a gentlemanly robbery, conducted on a world historical scale. Now Drake faces a dilemma. He is the most wanted man in the Spanish Empire, and the way back home is blocked. He cannot go back through the Strait of Magellan, as Spanish warships would surely be waiting. So he does the only thing he can. He sails north, far up the coast of North America, perhaps searching for the western end of the Northwest Passage. He lands somewhere near modern-day California, which he claims for England, naming it New Albion. Then, loaded with a fortune that will make England rich, he turns west and sails across the vast, empty Pacific. He has to complete a full circumnavigation of the globe to get home. Historians still debate the exact location of his landing in California, a mystery that adds to his legend. When he finally arrives back in Plymouth in 1580, he is not treated as a pirate. He is knighted by the Queen on the deck of his ship, the Golden Hind. He has become Sir Francis Drake, a national hero. He has shown England that the world's oceans are open to anyone with enough courage and enough cannons to claim them. He has forged a new national psychology, one built on naval power, Protestant defiance, and the romantic, profitable allure of the gentleman pirate. You have been a witness to the glory of this age, the courage of the explorers, the genius of the navigators, and the immense wealth that has flowed into the coffers of Europe. But now, you must turn and look at the shadow cast by the sails of your ships. It is a long, dark shadow that falls across entire continents, and its consequences are devastating. You stand on a Caribbean island, one of the first places Columbus landed, a land he described as a paradise teeming with gentle, welcoming people. A century later, it is a graveyard. The Taino people, who numbered in the hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, are gone. They have been completely annihilated, wiped from the face of the earth. This is not hyperbole, it is a demographic fact. The causes are a toxic combination of factors, a perfect storm of destruction. First, there was the disease. Remember the invisible cargo of microbes. Smallpox and measles swept through these island populations who had no immunity, killing with terrifying speed and efficiency. But disease was only part of the story. The Spanish thirst for gold led to the establishment of the encomienda system. In theory, it was a system of trusteeship. The Spanish crown granted a conquistador a number of native laborers, who were supposed to be protected and educated in the Christian faith in exchange for their labor. In practice, it was slavery in all but name. You see the indigenous people forced into the mines to dig for gold or onto plantations to grow sugar, working under brutal conditions from sunrise to sunset. They are beaten, starved, and worked to death. Families are torn apart. The social structure that has existed for 1,000 years disintegrates in a single generation. The psychological toll is as devastating as the physical one. You see a people overcome by a profound, collective despair. Their world has been turned upside down, their gods have been proven powerless, their leaders have been overthrown, and their lives have been reduced to meaningless, back-breaking labor for alien masters. The birth rates plummet. Many women, seeing the hopeless future that awaits their children, simply stop having them. Some historians document widespread instances of suicide and infanticide as a conscious act of resistance against this new, unbearable reality. It is a complete societal collapse, a cultural death that precedes the physical one. A Spanish priest, Bartolomé de las Casas, who had himself been was so horrified by what he witnessed that he dedicated the rest of his life to documenting the atrocities and lobbying the Spanish crown for reform. His writings, a short account of the destruction of the Indies, are a chilling, first-hand testament to the human cost of this age. And as the indigenous populations of the Americas die out, a new and even more terrible chapter begins. The colonists still need labor for their lucrative sugar and silver operations. They turn to another continent, Africa, and so begins the transatlantic slave trade, a forced migration of millions of people on a scale the world had never seen. The Portuguese, who had been dabbling in the African slave trade for decades, now expanded into an industrial-scale enterprise. You watch as the ships, the very same caravels and galleons that were once symbols of discovery, are converted into floating prisons. They are packed with human cargo, men, women, and children chained together in the dark, filthy holds for the horrific journey known as the Middle Passage. The cruelty is systematic and immense. The shadow of the sails has now created the monstrous triangular trade, where European goods are traded for African slaves. Those slaves are traded for American sugar and silver. and that wealth flows back to Europe to start the cycle again. This is the cognitive dissonance at the heart of the age of exploration. The same men who performed acts of incredible bravery and expanded the intellectual horizons of humanity were simultaneously architects and beneficiaries of systems of exploitation and cruelty of almost unimaginable scale. They mapped the world, but they broke it in the process. You have sailed the seas, hacked through the jungles, and witnessed the collision of worlds. Now, you stand in a quiet, dusty workshop in Antwerp or Amsterdam, and you see the entire grand, chaotic, bloody enterprise being distilled and ordered into a single, elegant object, a map. This is the final frontier of the age of exploration, not the discovery of new lands, but the intellectual conquest of the planet. The information pouring back from the fleets of Spain, Portugal, England, and Holland is a tidal wave of raw data, a chaotic jumble of logbooks, sailors, sketches, and captains' reports. The cartographer is the man who must turn this chaos into coherence. He is as much an artist as a scientist, a man who must decide what is true, what is false, and how to represent a three-dimensional globe on a two-dimensional sheet of paper. You watch one of the masters at work, a man like Gerardus Mac. He is surrounded by the tools of his trade, compasses, dividers, rulers, and pots of colored ink. He is not just drawing a picture, he is solving an impossible geometric problem. How do you unpeel the skin of an orange and lay it flat without distorting it? Every map is a necessary lie, a distortion of reality. Mercator's great genius, in 1569, was to invent a particular kind of lie that was incredibly useful. He created a projection, the one that still bears his name, where all the lines of longitude are parallel instead of converging at the poles. This dramatically distorts the size of land masses near the poles, making Greenland look as large as Africa. But it had one magical property. Any straight line drawn on his map was a line of constant compass bearing. For a sailor, this was a revolution. You could now plot your course from Lisbon to the Caribbean with a straight ruler, and as long as you kept your ship pointed at that same compass angle, you would arrive. Mercator had turned the globe into a practical, navigable grid. The maps themselves become objects of incredible beauty and power. They are no longer just functional charts for sailors. They are luxury items, status symbols for the wealthy merchants and princes who financed the voyages. You see a great war map, as large as a tapestry, being hand-colored by an assistant. The continents are outlined in gold leaf. The oceans are filled not with monsters, but with exquisitely drawn illustrations of the ships that have conquered them. The cartouches, the decorative emblems on the map, are elaborate works of art, depicting the native peoples, plants, and animals of the newly discovered lands. These maps are a form of propaganda. They are a visual declaration of mastery. To possess a map of the world is to possess the world in miniature, to hold the globe in your hands and in your mind. But there is a more subtle psychological power at work here. The very act of mapping changes your relationship with the world. You see the empty spaces, the terra incognita, shrink with each new edition. What was once a source of terror and myth is now a blank to be filled in, a problem to be solved. An unmapped coastline is a challenge, an invitation to the next expedition. The world is being demystified. The Amazon is no longer a mythical land of female warriors. It is a river system to be charted. Africa is no longer the home of Prester John. It is a landmass with a calculable coastline. One of the more peculiar byproducts of this new cartographic certainty was the persistence of phantom islands. Islands like Brazil or the Isle of Demons would appear on maps, often due to navigational errors or sailors' tall tales, and then be faithfully copied by other cartographers for centuries. Geographic ghosts that were incredibly difficult to exorcise. Historians still debate the moment when the psychological center of the world shifted from Jerusalem, the spiritual heart of medieval maps, to the prime meridian, the arbitrary line of longitude that would eventually run through Greenwich England. This shift from a sacred to a scientific ordering of the world is one of the most profound intellectual changes of the age. The blank spaces on the map are no longer God's domain, they are simply places you haven't been yet. You are standing in the great library of a European capital, sometime in the late 18th century. The air smells of old leather and drying ink. Before you, unrolled on a massive oak table, is the latest map of the world. It is a thing of breathtaking detail and precision. You compare it in your mind to the crude, monster-filled maps from the beginning of this journey 300 years ago. The change is profound. The coastlines of the Americas are no longer conjectural smudges, they are finely rendered lines. Africa is no longer a distorted curve, its shape is known and certain. The vast Pacific, once a terrifying void, is now peppered with hundreds of accurately placed islands. The great geographical questions that drove generations of men to their deaths have, for the most part, been answered. There is no Northwest Passage. There is no golden city of El Dorado. The world, it seems, is found. A strange kind of melancholy settles over you. What happens to the human spirit of exploration when the world runs out of new worlds to find? The heroic age of discovery, the age of stumbling upon entire continents by accident, is over. The low-hanging fruit of glory has been picked. A captain can no longer just plant a flag on a random beach and return a hero. The nature of exploration must change. It must evolve from a quest of discovery into a quest for knowledge. The focus shifts from the coastlines to the interiors, from the where to the what. The new explorer is no longer a conquistador with a sword, but a scientist with a specimen box, an artist with a sketchbook, and a cartographer with instruments of astonishing precision. This new age finds its ultimate expression in the person of a British captain named James Cook. He is not a nobleman or a court favorite. He is the son of a farm laborer, a man who rose through the ranks of the Royal Navy on pure, formidable talent. He is a navigator of genius, a meticulous scientist, and a leader of quiet, unwavering authority. You join him on the deck of his ship, the HMS Endeavour, and it feels different from the cramped, filthy caravels of the past. It is a floating laboratory. On board are astronomers, botanists, and artists. They carry not just cannons, but telescopes, chronometers for calculating longitude with unprecedented accuracy, and equipment for collecting and cataloguing the natural world. Cook's 3 voyages into the Pacific Ocean are the systematic, final chapters in the great story of discovery. His first mission is to sail to Tahiti to observe the transit of the planet Venus across the Sun, a global scientific effort to measure the size of the solar system. After that, he sails south, and with painstaking, obsessive accuracy, he charts the entire coastline of New Zealand, proving it is 2 islands and not part of a larger continent. He then sails west and maps the unknown eastern coast of Australia, claiming it for Britain. On his second voyage, he deliberately sails into the frozen, iceberg-choked waters of the Antarctic, circumnavigating the pole and pushing further south than any human in history. He proves, once and for all, that the great, mythical southern continent, Terra Australis Incognita, does not exist, or, if it does, it is a frozen wasteland at the bottom of the world. He has erased the last great fiction from the map. His greatest, and perhaps most eccentric, victory is over the old enemy, scurvy. He is obsessed with the health of his crew. He pioneers new standards of hygiene and diet, famously forcing his men to eat a food they initially despised, sauerkraut. He discovered that by making it a delicacy served only on the officer's table, the common sailors would soon demand it for themselves. A clever bit of reverse psychology that saved countless lives, but even this enlightened form of exploration has its shadow. Cook's arrival in these pristine lands, however well-intentioned, is the vanguard of colonial expansion, bringing with it the familiar spectre of disease and cultural disruption. The tragedy of his story is its end. On his third voyage, in Hawaii, A series of cultural misunderstandings escalates into violence. The man who charted more of the globe than anyone in history is killed by the native people on a beach. A brutal, messy end to a life of scientific order. Historians still debate his legacy. Was he a hero of the Enlightenment who opened the world to science, or the agent who opened it to the British Empire? In the end, he was both. He had filled in the last blank spaces, and in doing so, he closed a chapter of human history. The age of global exploration was complete. Now, the age of global exploitation could begin in earnest. The journey is over. You are no longer on the deck of a creaking caravel or staring at an empty horizon. You are here in your own time, in a world that those sailors could never have imagined. Yet, you are living inside the world they built. Its architecture is all around you, so vast and fundamental that it is mostly invisible. The food you eat is a direct legacy of that chaotic, world-changing biological shuffle. The potato that might be on your plate began its journey in the high Andes. The coffee in your cup started as a bean in Africa, was cultivated in the Americas with forced labor, and is now a global commodity that fuels your morning. The entire menu of the planet was rewritten in the wake of those ships, a culinary echo of a forgotten voyage. The global economic system, the intricate web of finance and trade that connects your bank account to a factory on the other side of the world, was born in the silver-veined heart of a mountain in Bolivia called Potosi. The river of silver that flowed from that single mountain was so immense that it funded the Spanish Empire, destabilized the economy of China, and created the first truly global currency. Our modern world of interconnected markets began with the glint of metal in a conquistador's eye. The languages you hear, the borders on the maps, the very demographic makeup of entire continents, are all the direct consequence of a treaty signed in a small Spanish town, a mutiny in a freezing Patagonian bay, or a battle fought on a beach in the Philippines. This history is not a foreign country, it is the room in which you are sitting. The psychological legacy is perhaps the most profound. You see, the conquistadors carried not only swords, but legal documents. One of the most bizarre and telling of these was the requerimiento. It was a legalistic declaration that Spanish soldiers were required to read aloud to indigenous populations before they could legally attack them. In it, they explained the history of the world, the authority of the Pope, and the divine right of the Spanish monarch to rule these lands, all in Spanish, a language the listeners could not possibly understand. Historians still marvel at this act of absurd, self-serving legalism. It was a way to create a fiction of consent, to soothe a guilty conscience, to frame an act of brutal conquest as a legally justified process. It was a sign of a new way of thinking, a world where even the most audacious acts of power must be wrapped in the comforting language of law and order. And so you are left with the final, unanswerable question. Was this age a glorious dawn or an unspeakable tragedy? Historians will debate this forever. Was the birth of our modern, interconnected, globalized society worth the price paid in broken cultures, enslaved populations, and extinguished peoples? Can you separate the courage of the explorers from the cruelty of the conquerors? Can you admire the beauty of the new maps without acknowledging the pain they caused? Perhaps the only honest answer is that it was both. It was the best and worst of humanity, acting on a global stage for the very first time. The drive to see what lies beyond the horizon is one of our most noble instincts. But the drive to conquer, possess, and exploit what we find there is our darkest shadow. The great blank spaces on the map are all gone now. But that old, restless whisper, the one that drove those sailors out onto a terrifying unknown sea, is still inside you. The ships are just different now. They are aimed at the stars, or the deepest trenches of the sea, or the infinitesimal spaces within the atom. The journey never really ends. The great ships, laden with their stories of triumph and sorrow, have returned to their final port. The frantic energy of discovery has settled. The roar of the cannons has faded into the quiet hum of history. and the vast, churning oceans of the past have now grown calm and still. The maps are all folded away, their intricate lines and forgotten names resting in the soft, settled dust of the archives. The long journey is complete, and now there is only the gentle, rhythmic rocking of a world at rest. You can feel that same gentle rhythm in your own breathing, a slow and easy tide that rises and falls without any effort, a silent current carrying you away from the busy shores of the waking world. Let the complexities and the conflicts of the story recede, like islands shrinking on the horizon, until there is nothing left but the deep, peaceful blue of this present moment. You are safe in your harbor, anchored in the quiet of your room, and there are no more storms to navigate tonight. The only voyage left is the one inward, a slow drift into the deep and tranquil waters of your own sleep, a place of perfect stillness and serene silence, where the only whisper is the gentle, lulling murmur of a world dreaming alongside you. The end. Sweet dreams.